Yes, thank you, Don. My name is Frank Fillmore. I think you all know that. We're being recorded today. That's why I'm standing here. I'm not going to be as mobile as I usually am, but I'm in frame right now. This is what we call the DB2 101 IBM Data Strategy briefing. We do this about once a year, and I probably spent the last week incorporating a lot of what we heard out in Almaden for the big data announcement. So we have I'm under an hour now. We're getting started a little bit late. So I'm going to go as rapidly as I can. Please like to make it interactive. I'll repeat the question if anybody has a question. But I want to try to cover the waterfront. You know, those troops that get together and do the complete works of Shakespeare in 45 minutes. That's pretty much what this is about. So Donna, would you give me the next slide? So our agenda today, the Fillmore Group, who we are as an IBM business partner. We're going to talk about what's new in 2013, some of the announcements that happened just last week. And then we're going to break down the information management portfolio, data governance, information integration, data warehousing and big data, and an update on the mainframe. We have some mainframe folks that I just told the story for earlier about being out in Almaden. And then our Oracle competitive takeout. Donna, would you give me the next slide? So the Fillmore Group, Frank Fillmore, DB2 Gold Consultant and Information Champion. My colleague Kim May is an Information Champion. We have dozens of experienced certified IT professionals that work on our services engagements. We provide consulting services. We are an IBM authorized training partner, so we deliver IBM branded education courses. And we are an information management reseller, so we can give a complete business solution to a customer in terms of software implementation services and authorized training. Donna, next slide, please. It is not. Hit the page down button on the other side. Okay. Our services, we focus on DB2, that is our heritage. So we do implementations, migrations, and tuning, backup and recovery, all the types of things you need for the care and feeding of a DB2 database. We're just starting out with big data. I don't want to oversell anybody. You know, we're going to be Sherpas. We're going to help you up the mountaintop. We might not have been up yet either, but this is an exploding area right now with a lot of interest, and I'm going to talk more about what big data is. I had a conversation with Rich at the beginning about, you know, what is big data. So we'll give you what our definition is. And we work with big insights. One of my disappointments was Linux came out 15 or 20 years ago, became popular, and I thought it was the looniest icon for any product ever, that little Linux penguin, until now. So now we have the Hadoop elephant. You know, if you know the backstory, this was Dan Cutting's son's toy. So he named the MapReduce database that he helped invent after his kid. So thank goodness he didn't play with My Little Pony. Infosphere streams, data in motion, and examining that data, so tweets and Facebook posts and things like that. Data governance tools, information integration, and data warehousing. So we're going to talk about those things from a software standpoint, but these are the implementation services that we provide. Donna, would you give me next? So the IBM authorized training, we do a lot of training, DB2, Infosphere, Information Server, and Optum products. We provide the IBM authorized training. So we have publicly scheduled classes. If you go to the IBM website, if you see classes held in Towson, they'll be at our facility. But we also do private training classes on site for customers, and we do customized training. So just recently we were asked to put together a training program for a very large Z customer, federal government agency that is looking for help with DB2 10 for ZOS. New feature functionality, so transitioning their base to that, as well as the tooling that takes advantage of that. And what I wanted to emphasize here, however, is the big data training that we provide. We are the exclusive North American provider of big insights and streams training now. And this was something that happened just within the last couple of months. Kim, you look like you want to add something?
No.
Okay, you had that expectant look on your face, like you're going to forget to say. So, okay, good.
I am listening to every word you're saying.
Yeah, I can tell that. Yes, I appreciate it. The big insights and streams training, because this is an area where a lot of people are starting out and they're going to need some help. And there are a lot of, if you believe in management by Airline Magazine, a lot of companies are being told what's our big data strategy, what's our big data initiatives. how do we get started? One of the best ways to get started is get some training so that you don't spend a lot of time and money unnecessarily. Would you give me the next slide? So the big news for 2013, and this is hot off the press, is just a shade over a week old. IBM had an announcement at the Albanin Labs that Kim and I were able to attend, and Tracy Mustachio of IBM, whom we met there. The two things that I want to call out from that, it was a huge announcement, but the two things that are most important are the pure data system for Hadoop, so remember the little elephant. So this is another of IBM's appliances bundling the software and the hardware together for a complete solution that you can be up in hours rather than days or weeks. 8 times faster deployment. It's the first appliance with built-in analytics accelerator and built-in archiving tools. So I sat down and talked to one of the other IBM executives out in Almaden, and I said, okay, the big value prop for Hadoop and MapReduce is you get a lot of cheap hardware, and you lash it together, and you can run these huge queries against massive databases very inexpensively. So now what you've done is you've completely obliterated that value prop by taking a hardware approach to this, and IBM hardware is not cheap. We're not talking about commodity Intel processors. And she said the reason that we're doing this is for people who have already done the POC. She said because they realize how difficult it is to do all that integration themselves. Instead of buying all of the commodity parts, and if you see the pile of stuff that goes into a Hadoop solution, you have Jackal and Hive and HBase and all the other pieces that need to be installed and integrated. Once somebody's done that in a lab, and somebody says, this is great, this is doing exactly what we want it to do. Now it needs to be available 24/7, and it needs to be backed up, and it needs to be recoverable. We need high availability. That's where this comes in. The second really big announcement was DB2 for LUW, Linux, Unix, and Windows, version 10.5, with Blue acceleration. So this is basically IBM's columnar database. So for you database techies in here, we've been dealing with rows of data for the last 30 years. So what IBM has done is that they have inverted that, almost pivoted that, and allow you to face the data with columnar data. And I have an illustration on the next slide. The reason this is important is because we may have dozens or hundreds of columns in a table, but there may be a few pieces of data that are of interest. And we've seen, again, amazingly faster analytics, 8 to 25 times faster. And they said at the announcement, that's what the lawyers would allow us to put on the slides. They said, we're seeing hundreds of times faster query acceleration with Blue. Storage savings with compression, and no indexes, no aggregates, no tuning, no SQL schema changes. So very much the same value prop as Netezza for a pure data system for analytics. The same sort of things that you're hearing about Netezza, now you can get built into the DB2 database. So Donna, would you give me the next slide? Thank you. All the people who are going to be watching this later on YouTube is going to wonder, who the heck is Donna? That's right. They're never going to know. So the Blue acceleration, dynamic in-memory processing, and so you can see an illustration here. Instead of having multiple rows on a page, I'm going to have all of the values for a particular column on a page. So when I do an I/O and I bring it in, I can process that hopefully in memory. I'm trying to do I/O avoidance, so I have it in memory and I can process it there, which is why I get much faster analytics time. The actionable compression. The data can be, preserves the data ordering so that the data can be used without decompressing, so you don't have the CPU overhead of the compression, decompression. And then parallel vector processing, so I can issue a single instruction and operate on multiple pieces of data at a time. So lots of IBM technology is being baked into the base DB2 product. So Donna, would you give me the next slide? Thank you. So that's sort of the intro. That's the big picture of who we are. We're going to do a deeper dive now into some of these technologies. One thing that I didn't announce, I want to make this interactive. We actually, for good questions or for answers to questions that I ask, we actually have a premium. We have U.S. legal tender, dollar, coins. So Donna is the coin fairy, so I won't be tossing from here and maybe hit somebody in the glasses. So if you have a question, please go ahead and ask me. We have something for you. So would you give me the next slide? So this, I think, is probably the most important slide from the early part of this presentation. This is something that I got from an IBMer at Almaden because I said it illustrates, it's very, very data rich, as IBM slides usually are. But it really gives you a good overview for DB2 of what the packaging is today. And this was the Kepler announcement. This is the bundling in version 10.5. So now you can get pure scale, which is the shared disk, DB2 for ZOS like parallel sysplex parallelism. So I have multiple independent data servers all accessing the same data on disk. So if I have a failure of one node within the cluster, I continue processing. This is the Oracle RAC equivalent, if you will, although much better because it scales for some reasons that we're going to see. This is also bundled together in an appliance as a pure data system for transactions. So if you want to buy this, have it wheeled off the loading dock with the hardware and the software bundle, you can do that. The second one is the DB2 data partitioning feature. This is the shared nothing. So this is the hashing algorithm where subsets of the data exist on independent servers where they all have their own memory and CPU processing and disk space. That can also be purchased as an appliance as the pure data system for operational analytics. And then I have the Blue acceleration, which was just announced. So all of this comes bundled in one package today. The problem is in 10.5, I want to limit that, this is a journey, not a destination. You can't use these in combination. You pick one. So if I want to use Blue acceleration, I can't use pure scale. If I want to use Blue acceleration, I can't use DPF. That will not always be the story, but that's the way that it is today. Go ahead.
I see the key thing on the DB2 Blue acceleration. We're missing the high concurrency and multi-tenancy capabilities.
Yes, and that's true. I don't know. From the DB2 standpoint, I mean, DB2 supports multi-tenancy today. The idea is that I'm a service provider for those of you not familiar with the term multi-tenancy. I'm a service provider. I want to have multiple customers' data reside within the same database, but I want to have it logically partitioned so customer A can't see customer B's database. So I had not explored multi-tenancy with Blue. If it's something that somebody says, okay, I want to use Blue acceleration, but I also want to have multi-tenancy, maybe it's something that's going to get baked in later. I can't tell you for sure.
And is it the key partitioning? Is that the key capability that we're looking at that puts it in the operational analytics, or what?
The partitioning, the difference is if I have a big query and I want to sort the data out. So you pay a price with the partitioning.
Right.
I issue a single query to a coordinating node, and then it parcels the query out to the other nodes. Primarily, depending on what my hashing key is, whether it's order number, customer number, or patient ID, or something like that. So I can run the query in parallel on individual systems and then gather all that data back together. But the problem is that I'm doing the data's running the query's running independently on different servers, but then I have to gather that answer set back and deliver it. So there is a price to be paid, and some people have seen I'm better off not using the hashing algorithm and just using the high availability pure scale of shared servers. Yes.
Yeah, and the other thing to keep in mind is that customers that currently own DB2 Warehouse Edition, a lot of them bought it just for the data partitioning.
Correct. Thank you for pointing that out.
So with the new bundling, they don't have to own the warehouse. They can just own DB2 and have that same functionality.
Yeah, InfoSphere Warehouse is going away as a product.
Right.
That had been, and that included the data partitioning feature and a lot of tooling around the warehouse. Next one.
Does he get a coin?
Yes, go ahead. Yes.
Wait, does
yeah,
she
I can't give
get
one to
a
Kim.
coin?
Yeah. Representatives of the Fillmore Group not eligible. So a little bit about pure scale. So my take on this, and this is probably politically incorrect, but here we go. The pure scale is like middle school sex. There's a lot of talking about it. Nobody's doing it. The problem is that there was an InfiniBand requirement. This is the shared servers accessing a single data store, individual servers all lashed together operating against one repository of data, as opposed to the hashing algorithm, which separates the data. So if one node goes down, I can still process my applications. Apparently, and this is anecdotal feedback I've gotten from IBM, we had been asked before to do some proofs of concept, and they said you need to have 3 demonstrable pure scale implementations on your resume, production implementations. And we hadn't been able to find it. We went out to other business partners, other gold consultants, and it just wasn't there. And what we believe happened is the InfiniBand requirement, because it's a very fast communications vehicle, was what IBM recommended or demanded it at that point. The problem was that a lot of shops, when they were evaluating it, their communication specialist or networking specialist says we don't support InfiniBand. They can't have it. So the InfiniBand requirement has been removed, and we're hoping that PureScale is going to become more ubiquitous now. So give me the next slide, please. So PureScale, scalability and high availability. I can update individual members for rolling updates and things like that. So again, like Parallel Sysplex, they don't all have to be at the same level of code. I can, so I don't have to take an outage for planned maintenance. I don't have an outage for unplanned maintenance, or unplanned outages if something bad happens to one of the members. I'm still up and processing. So this greatly simplifies high availability solutions. We've been implementing those with HEDR and QREP for a long time for customers now. So this puts it all in one package. Donna, would you go ahead and give me the next slide? So this is an orienting slide that we have here. IBM's data management portfolio has three major purposes, all undergirded by an end-to-end governing solution, and that is to manage your data, integrate the data, and analyze it. So when we talk about managing data, we're talking about the database servers, DB2, Informix, and SolidDB. For integrating, we have the Pure Data Systems, the Information Server Hub for data stage and quality stage, and then MDM, the Master Data Management. And then to analyze the data, we have InfoSphere Data Explorer, which is a product that has been rebranded from Vivisimo, which was an IBM acquisition relatively recently. InfoSphere Streams and Big Insights that we're going to talk about some more. But one of the important things of the IBM solutions is the whole area of governance. The idea is that data ages, data becomes obsolete, data is retained for compliancy purposes. Data needs to be retained for 7 years or 10 years based on legal requirements or business requirements. And so managing the security and the life cycle of the data is important across all of these different mechanisms, all these different purposes that we have here, managing integration and analysis. After you get your hors d'oeuvre, would you give me another page? No, that's fine. So the first item that we're going to look at is the governance, which is sort of the undergird or the infrastructure for the whole shoot match. Go ahead, give me the next one, please. So IBM acquired Princeton Softtech. Julie, are you legacy Princeton Softtech? Did I get that wrong? No? Okay. Princeton Softtech provided what is now branded as the Optum Solutions. And there are a series of functions that are provided within that. Data discovery, the ability to discover relationships between data that you may not know exist. So if you have a company that has just conducted a merger or an acquisition and are bringing two different data stores together, you could find customer data across boundaries in different disparate data stores. One may be in a legacy file system, and another may be in a relational database, and be able to combine that together. Or against silos in different business units. So you can look across finance and personnel and find out your customers are also your employees in certain cases, and that type of data discovery is very important. Test data management. Most customers cannot afford full-size test data environments, so being able to subset your data and do it logically so that you maintain relationships between tables so that your referential integrity keys are honored. Also things like data masking, so you can only show certain data. For example, the bank teller can only see the last 4 digits of your credit card number. They can't see the whole credit card number, and being able to manage that. Data growth management, so you can archive or offset data that is obsolete. Kim and I worked with a customer that manages nuclear power plants. And they said as long as the plant is functioning, they need to maintain the data for decades, because if a part fails or needs to be replaced, they need to be able to trace back its provenance. So we're talking on the order of maybe 50 years, as long as it's functioning, even in the decommissioning process. So the idea that this data needs to be archived but still available is available through data growth management. And then finally, application retirement. The idea is that we may replace an application or a business function may become obsolete. So what do we do with that data, and how do we get that out of our data stores so we're not backing it up and storing and analyzing obsolete data? Anna, would you go ahead? So Guardium, one of my DB2 Gold consultant colleagues, Ron Ben-Natan, actually founded Guardium. It is a means of data security, especially for trusted users. So the idea is that, yes, we want to keep the bad guys that are hacking our computers from points east. we want to prevent them from doing that. But really, a lot of risk that we bear is for users who work within the enterprise and maybe looking at data that they have access to, but no business purpose to look at or manipulate. So a DBA who goes fishing for the CEO's salary because he has access to all the data as part of his job, you can actually, on a rules-based system, be able to capture in-flight transactions which are not allowed. Because after the fact, log scanning and things like that, the mayor's already left the barn. So that's what Guardium does. And you can see there is just a wide variety of data sources that are supported. This was not originally an IBM product. It was developed independently and then acquired by IBM. So pretty full database support. No database changes. And there is a piece called an STAP, or a software tap, that is actually installed by database on the database server that catches the transaction in flight. So we'll talk about the STAP again in a second. Would you go ahead? So Guardium prevents data breaches. It ensures the integrity of sensitive data, so it makes sure that there are no unauthorized changes. You don't want changes made outside your applications or your business rules, and reduces the cost of compliance because you can build in the rules that comply to the standards which you need to follow based on your business. Query capture and replay. So this is a new product built off of Guardium technology. The STAP that is used to enforce the security rules can also be used to capture the SQL that runs against the database. Now, why might we want to do that? Well, going back to the test data management that we talked about before, I may want to build a test database, and I may want to plan some changes in some database configuration parameters, and I want to see how a production run of SQL that just ran against my database for the last hour in production runs against this test database with the parameter changes. How does that work? Or I'm expecting a doubling in volume. I can actually run an hour's worth of queries, inserts, updates, and deletes against my database in half the time. I can do a 2x speed up to see that happen. So again, all of these different databases are supported. What I can do is I can capture the SQL on one database server and run it against another. I could even use this as a migration tool. I could capture the SQL running against an Oracle database and run it against DB2 as the target. I can do the play or the replay against the DB2 database and see if the APIs that IBM supports since DB2 version 9.7, enabling the PL/SQL, is working against my actual SQL. So you don't need load runner, you don't need test scripts, you don't need 50 people sitting in a room hitting the keyboard. You can actually take production runs. And this is combined with some of IBM's other products like the masking techniques and the test data management, so that you can protect privacy data in your test environment. Next slide, please. Question?
I don't
Larry.
want any more money. I just
Okay.
want to ask a question
Sure.
about Hadoop in that very same
Hadoop?
environment. Yes.
I don't know if that's supported. I don't know if that's supported yet, but I could find out for you.
Okay.
Yeah, Hadoop is a little bit different animal, literally. But I don't know. You would have to run the STAP on all of the different MapReduce servers, and so I don't know if that's supported yet. But that's a good question.
Was the question?
The question was.
Support Hadoop?
No.
No, does
No,
query
Optum.
capture replay support Hadoop?
Oh.
From Optum. Right.
Because Guardian, well, Hadoop it's a MapReduce, right? Unless
Right.
you're using HBase or something like that to go SQL.
So the only question is the STAP supported on the Hadoop MapReduce servers? And the answer is I don't know.
But
So why don't I
STAP
find
is
that out?
supported on-
What's that?
Yeah, Guardian does support Hadoop.
Oh, it does. Okay, so if it supports, then query capture replay should work as well, because it's the same. It's the same
Yeah, but
mechanism.
it wouldn't capture SQL, it was capturing something else.
Right.
So, yeah.
Yeah,
We'll
I
have
was
to-
looking at Optum in that particular case,
Mhm.
right? Not Guardian.
Oh, you're back a couple of slides.
Well, the one. Okay, never mind.
No.
I thought it was Optum query capture that we were looking
It is
at.
Optum query capture replay.
Well, so I guess the question is really, Guardian does support Hadoop.
Right.
Whether it works with the Optum query replay is another question.
Is another question, and
Okay.
I have to get that answer for you offline.
All right.
Okay. Go ahead, Dan. Oh, we're here. You already did that. So the Optum Performance Manager. This is IBM's legacy database performance management tool. This has been branded Optum, even though it didn't come from Princeton Softtech. But the idea is that IBM is building out a central means of managing database servers. Right now, IBM database servers of DB2 and Informix but also eventually other database servers. The long-term plan is to give your DBAs a central repository, a central place to go and manage these resources. So the idea is to, performance management. We want to reduce costs. We want to be able to ensure that you get the optimal performance. You're not overpaying for hardware, for bad performing SQL, and those types of things. So you can see a locking dashboard within OPM. So the idea is if I have a problem query, I have the database is giving me inconsistent response time. So my application is running. Sometimes it runs in sub-second. Sometimes it takes 30 seconds. I don't know why. So I can drill down from a very high level to a very discrete level and find out what's happening within the database. Not running a series of command line scripts, but being able to do this in a GUI format. There are two add-ons, and these are important to point out. The Query Tuner, which actually gives you advice on how to make the queries run faster. And then the Extended Insight. So the story of the Extended Insight that Kim and I lived was a customer that's relatively near here, a large hospitality industry customer, had WebSphere running on AIX and DB2 for ZOS on the mainframe. And their loyalty program application was running in that environment, and they had terrible response time, and they couldn't figure out why. Well, their developers were using an integrated development environment, and they weren't writing SQL. That was being generated. So the idea was that somebody would say on the DB2 for ZOS side, hey, this is a terrible query. Why did you write the query this way? And they go back to the developers. The developer said, I didn't write that query. I don't know what you're talking about. So the Extended Insight actually allows you to see all the way back to the original piece of code and see all of the, with Pure Query and the ability to monitor the network time, the app server time, the database time. And the way that they were solving this problem, they gathered a dozen or so people in a room every 2 weeks for a couple of hours to shout at each other. They said it was like armed camps because the DB2 DBA said, you give us a SQL, this is the way it's going to run. And they said, well, we're not giving you the SQL, we don't know what you're talking about, your database runs slow. So the idea is that you can, in a holistic fashion, it's a lot simpler when we were writing COBOL CICS against the mainframe. We didn't have networks to deal with. So this helps address the development environments that we have today and still be able to get you the performance that you need. So that's it from a high level about the governance product. So now we're going to shift gears into information integration. So again, our orienting screen. The central product in the information integration suite is the information server. This is primarily the aggregation of products that IBM acquired from Essential, the part of Informix that they did not buy a decade ago. So data stage, quality stage. This was an invention from Ambush Goyal, who was the GM of information management a couple of GMs ago. And he said, I have all these great tools, but customers are saying it's very expensive and time consuming to integrate them all together. Can I have a pre-bundled package that's installs on a server that the most commonly ETL, extract, transform, and load processes are all in one package that I can deploy easily. So that's what information server is. So I can use it as the foundation for information integration. Now, this is an interesting story when we talk about big data today, because this is the traditional way that we have handled information processing for decades, literally. We have taken the data from our transactional systems, we have scrubbed it, we have consolidated, we've aggregated it, we put it in a data warehouse that's optimized for analytic queries, and then we run it. So that paradigm still exists. There may be some people, hopefully none in this room, but there may be some people who would say that Hadoop and big data are going to kill the need to do any of this stuff, and I don't believe it. I remember back in 1988, Computer World was taking the over-under on when the last mainframe was going to get unplugged, and the consensus was 1992. So here we are, 20 years later, and we're still loving it. There will always be the need for ETL and that sort of processing of our data, I believe. So at the high level, the components are data stage and quality stage, and we're going to see each of those individually. And then the foundation tools, the things like the business glossary, which allows me to define the metadata in business terms, and then federation and replication tools that we work with quite a bit. So Donna, would you give me the next slide? Foundation tools, information analyzer, so again, to do data discovery about relationships within the data which may not be readily apparent. You can look at things like the dependencies between columns. So an obvious example is an automobile make and model. So there is nothing prescriptive in the database that says make and model go together, but you don't own a Ford CRV, you own a Honda CRV. So the make and the model are codependent columns, same way city state are to a lesser degree. But the idea is that you can discover dependencies that you may not know exist using the analyzer tool. Information Architect is IBM's data modeling tool, similar to Irwin. Fast Track is the ability to build data stage jobs very quickly through a GUI interface without having to do the drag and drop, but just saying I want this data to go over into that data store and be able to map that very quickly. Data Stage is a very powerful tool, but it can also be time consuming. So Fast Track, it does what its name says. It gets you the time to value much more quickly. And then the Business Glossary, I want to define a customer. A customer is someone who has spent $50,000 with our organization within the last 2 years. So the idea is I want to codify that in our Business Glossary so that when somebody says, give me a list of all the customers, we have a definition that everybody agrees to what a customer is. So we can codify that and then use that throughout the application development process from data modeling through ETL tools, etc. Go ahead and give me the next slide, please. So quality stage, deduplication, get rid of redundancies. Anybody who has received, 3 catalogs on the same day and it still happens. I mean, with all the online marketing, all the different permutations are just amazing to me that people can screw up the names. We actually received, I have a stepson who has a different last name from me and my wife, and he receives catalogs from REI with his first name and my last name. So somebody did some data analysis, they just didn't do it very well. So the idea is that you can clean that stuff up at quality stage and you can define the level of confidence that 2 Kate Roberts and Catherine Roberts are really the same person. So you can do that with quality stage. Go ahead and give me the next slide. Data stage is the ETL tool. I've worked with this a lot. The idea that I can take a variety of different data stores and different data formats that are there for one business purpose, and I can put that data someplace else for a different business purpose. So the classic use is building out the data warehouse, but I might also need to invoke a web service because I've just sold product and now I have to generate a pick list in a warehouse so that somebody can go and pull it off the shelf and ship it to me. So I can develop encapsulated streams of data. When an event happens in one business process, that can be reflected in a different business process. So data stage, very powerful ETL management tool. What you see here is the canvas. These are a series of icons that you drag and drop, and you just draw lines between them, and you logically build your business processes. So you don't need to be a programmer. There's no coding involved. It's just point and shoot. Data replication. This slide is important because IBM is going in a different direction with its replication technologies. IBM purchased Data Mirror 6 or 7 years ago. IBM had some legacy technologies, SQLrep and QRep. And there was a lot of conflict within the marketplace between IBMers because different people were incented to sell different things. And if you remember back in the days of the AS400 and the RS6000, different salespeople would show up at the same customer and basically say, you want our product, you don't want their product still being IBM's product. And in order to avoid that problem, IBM has bundled them together into a single part number, and you get all the functionality of all 3 products, SQLrep, the QRep, the legacy MQ-based, and the CDC, the change data capture. So you can decide at implementation time which is the best product to use for a particular business task. And I don't think I mentioned it here, but my colleague Kim actually did a presentation at IOD actually defining the best use cases for different technologies. So now you can buy them all in one bundle. The important things to keep in mind here are that IBM is going to implement all new functionality in IIDR. The individual products that we know today, InfoSphere Replication Server and InfoSphere Change Data Capture, are going to be quiesced so that all new feature functionality, and there are some migration and some upgrade issues, so if you have customers that are interested in this, please let us know. We can give you a hand with that. Change data capture, really good for a variety of different sources and targets, as you can see there. It is very easy to set up. It uses TCP/IP as a transport layer, so you don't have the overhead of setting up MQ, which is the transport layer for Q replication. But the idea is that you take data loads off of one server and you can move it onto other servers. So data warehousing broadcasting data, let's say from a HQ to different individual business units at different geographic locations, so they only get to see their data. Classic log-based replication technology. Next one. InfoSphere replication server as it exists today is the QRep product. Very low latency, very high volume, so we work with a number of different customers, very large banks, financial institutions, federal government agencies that all use this. The FBI uses QRep as its replication technology for high availability for the National Criminal Justice System. So when somebody on a TV program says, run this license plate, that's the one that it usually gets run against. So we need to make sure that that is up all the time, and this technology is used to make sure that the failover site is consistent within a couple of seconds of the main site. There is the overhead of installing MQ. MQ is very fast. It ensures, it provides assured delivery of the messages between the source and the target. One of the problems we've seen with implementations that usually the people who manage MQ are different than the folks that manage the database, so there requires some organizational cooperation. So that may be a reason to choose a different technology. Go ahead, Don. And then the federation server, this is data virtualization, so the ability to issue a single SQL query and be able to access data from Oracle Financials and DB2 running payroll personnel and Sybase running sales. So I could issue a single SQL statement and be able to pull data from all three of those and virtualize that together. And this is a product that's been around for a long, long time. It's IBM's data joiner technology that was invented about 20 years ago. So the idea is in a single place I can even get access to non-relational data stores. So Microsoft Access, anything that supports ODBC, and I can actually extend this capability to data stores, numerical processing, and shop floor equipment and things like that if I need to. So I can pull that data real time. Rather than replicating it, rather than putting it all in one place, I can go out and get the data where it lives. And then MDM. So MDM is a different approach to the problem of I have Catherine Roberts and Kate Roberts, and are they the same person? So IBM has a portfolio of products that help you address that. The master data service and the MDM server gives you the ability either virtually or in a physical master repository of storing data about products or about people, about customers or patients or whomever, and be able to do that in a consistent fashion. So the product thing is what fascinates me now, because I want to buy something on the internet and I search for the lowest price. Well, sometimes I search by the manufacturer's part number, but when I go see it on a website, it has an SKU which that retailer uses. So trying to associate those products together is a problem for me. It's also a problem for the vendor. And then there are substitute parts. So I just had a problem with my dishwasher. I wanted to replace the motor. So what is the successor part, or what is the replacement part? So the ability to harmonize all that data, so I can request all of the information about a particular part and know its many guises. That's what the MDM allows me to do. And then finally, for the identity insight, this is the who is who and who knows who. This is used in the casino industry to ensure or try to combat fraud, so that a player in a game is not in cahoots with a dealer, to identify the fact that they may share an address or a telephone number or something like that, that there is some overlap in their identities. And it's also used in a lot of security applications. So after 9/11, this technology exploded within the federal government. What is now called Identity Insight, it was Entity Analytics was the prior name for it. So go ahead, Don. So master data management, and I think I've gone through most of this, so I won't go through it again, but we could see B. Jones, Billy Jones, and William Jones. We can see that two of those people are the same person, but the third is not, and being able to distinguish them. So Kim and I worked with a customer recently that was receiving prescriptions from all sorts of vendors all over the country. They were aggregating prescription data. And so the idea was, different doctors code people's names different ways. How can we find out if this is the same person receiving the same medication? This is going to be very important in the healthcare industry as we try to lower costs. So these types of techniques allows us to get a consistent view of who people are, what they're taking, what their insurance covers, etc. Entity resolution analysis, so the who is who, establish an identity. These two people, I have a second home So I have 2 addresses, so the fact that I own 2 homes in 2 different states, I'm still the same person. And so if I purchase something and have it shipped to one address, vendors like Amazon would like to know that I'm still purchasing stuff as the same person, even if I use a different credit card or have a different ship-to place. And then who knows who, the obvious and non-obvious links between folks. Jeff Jonas, who is an IBM fellow, did a great presentation on linking together based on publicly available knowledge the 9/11 hijackers, and the fact that just based on if this technology had been applied in that case early on, could have linked people together who were in different states, who were using different names, and were doing their best to be unrelated, being able to find that out. So give me the next slide. Okay, so the next and almost last, we have a couple of more topics to go, but the data warehouse and big data. So any other questions? Larry's been good about helping out. Anything that I've covered too fast? Anything that you have any questions about? Okay, go ahead.
Is the blue technology separately licensed?
No, it's bundled in 10.5, so when it's baked in. When you get 10.5, you get it. And there is, now I'm going to defer to Kim on this because I know there's a lot of question about the upgrade and the licensing. Can you address that? And I'll have to repeat some of what you say.
Yeah, there's been, and it's really hard, the messaging is so difficult these days because there's so many different bundles, but the advanced, so IBM had the Enterprise Server Edition, which was like the Cadillac, and then they went with the Advanced Enterprise Server Edition, which became the Cadillac. If you own the Advanced Enterprise Server Edition, you are eligible to use Blue at version 10.5 at no additional charge.
And you get all the other stuff besides. You get the Pure Scale and the DPF.
But you can only use one of them.
But you can only use one at a time, and that's a technical thing. That's not a
That's
licensing
a
thing.
technical thing.
So is Pure Scale bundled in AESE and 10.1?
10.5.
10.5.
Yes.
Yes. So
That is
anybody,
true.
so one of the things we've been trying to do, and some of the IBMers in the room know, sort of been a freak about this, but any customers that are at ESE right now, if you can get them to AESE before the price increase that nobody wants to know about is announced, they're not gonna pay anything additional. We've got people that are spending, hundreds of thousands of dollars to buy Pure Scale.
Right.
And then, the blue thing, and the assumption is that hopefully before version 11, you'll be able to do Pure Scale and blue together, which would be really, really sweet.
Yeah. Coin, please.
Well, okay.
Yeah. Oh, you misunderstood the hand signal.
No,
Yeah.
no. I was.
Thank you. You weren't tossing. I know it's complicated. That's right. And the next slide. Thank you. So this is a discussion of IBM's appliances and analytic solutions. So I mentioned the Pure Data System for Operational Analytics. This is the old ISAS. So the IBM Smart Analytics Server has been rebranded as the Pure Data System for Operational Analytics. DB2 under the covers, running traditional data warehouse loads for things like real-time fraud detection. The one on the left is what you knew and love as Netezza. So that's the Pure Data System for Analytics. So the idea is that it's been rebranded as part of the family in the same way that there's a Pure Data System for Hadoop. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna ask if anybody, IBMers included, anybody can name the 4 Pure Data Systems. What are they? Need all 4. 4. Hunter.
Pure data for transactions, operational analytics, and Hadoop.
Perfect. Give that man a call. Very good. Let me say
Do
that.
I get a band raise?
So the answer on the recording was Pure Data for Transactions, Operational Analytics, and Hadoop. So the idea is that you can buy bundled, installed software on the platform, faster time to value. The idea is that instead of buying the hardware separately, and then trying to install the software and make it all work together, you can do that right out of the box. And then finally, the DB2 Advanced Enterprise Server Edition. There is no more InfoSphere warehouse. I mentioned that before. So one of the questions I have, Kim, and I'm going to defer to you on this again, there used to be tooling within the cubing and the SQW and all that sort of stuff that was in InfoSphere warehouse. Can I still get that?
I believe that's in version 10.5.
And they just bundled that in 10.5? Okay, and I'm getting a yes from Hunter. No more points. Okay, AESE, got it.
I think it's in there. The new.
Go ahead and give me the next slide. Okay, so why big data? So I'm going to ask for a couple of definitions of big data. Now I'm going to exclude you from this, Steve Tesla, because you certainly have invested. Steve is our big data channels rep. So for anybody else, give me a definition of big data.
Too big to store.
Too big to store. Okay, so volume. Okay. Anybody else?
Velocity.
Velocity. Whose deep voice was that? I'm trying to figure out if it was Rich or it was Steve trying to this thing. Yeah. So the idea. Give Mary Jo a coin. That was quite an invitation there. That whole gravelly thing. So the idea is, yes, there's variety, velocity, volume, and veracity. The 4 V's. And Kim added a 5th, which is value. The idea is that we want to get value from all this data. So the example that I had used of big data not too long ago, some people poo-poo it and say, you know, this is an airplane magazine, this Harvard Business School review, you know, blowing something up. But I think it's real. I think, you know, I started out when 4GLs were going to take over the world. So please understand, I can be as jaded as the rest of them. But an example that I used not too long ago was, I'm Catholic, Pope Benedict resigned. He decided he was going to step down as Pope. Was that a big data opportunity? Was that a business opportunity, first of all? And then was it a big data opportunity? My feeling was, if I was a travel agent and I could scan Twitter and apply sentiment analysis to those tweets, I could identify prospects that may want to take a trip to Rome to see the installation of the new Pope. That's a business opportunity that didn't exist before because it's near real time, it's a black swan, it's unexpected, it came out of nowhere, and popes haven't resigned in 600 years. So the idea is that I could derive value from Twitter and Facebook in ways that would not have existed even 2 years ago. Does that make sense as an option? So the idea is business opportunities that just weren't possible before. The other comment based on volume is absolutely the case. Have a customer now for competitive reasons, a large financial institution, which is storing 90 days of historical data. So they have customers that have millions of checking transactions in a period. I mean, they're large institutional customers that are writing, you know, just millions of checks. So they want to keep 2 years of data, not just 90 days. Well, this volume problem is orders of magnitude. Now, they are, fortunately, IBM mainframe customers, and they have a couple of different options. One is to use the IDAA that we're going to talk about in a little bit, the IBM DB2 Analytics Accelerator. And in DB211, there's going to actually be the capability to archive data using some of the temporal data business period technology that existed before. But we're seeing these types of requirements because customers say, you know, I may write a check to my auto insurance company every 6 months. So 6 months from now, when I need to write the check again, and I want to find out if my rates have gone up, if I'm only maintaining 90 days within my data store, that doesn't help, right? So I need the ability to do that. So we're seeing this in terms of data at rest, which is what the big insights, the Hadoop MapReduce attacks, and then the InfoSphere streams, which attacks the data in motions, the tweet and the sentiment analysis. So go ahead. So this is where I wanted to give a handout to Tracy Mustachio of IBM, recently of Vivissimo. And Tracy, I'm going to ask you, can you come up here for just a second to speak to this slide? I know that it's one that you're familiar with, and your product's in the upper left-hand corner. I'm going to step out of the way, and you're going to...
I'm standing here. Okay.
You're standing, right.
And this is going on YouTube?
Eventually, yeah. I'm going to get you a sign release. Don't worry about it.
Okay.
Is she framed?
So hi, thank you for inviting me. As Frank mentioned, I came from Vivissimo about a little less than a year ago, was acquired into IBM, and we were really thrilled about it because we felt like we had this technology capability that was just really sort of underserved in the marketplace, great technology that we just couldn't get out quick enough to everybody. And the capability, we renamed it InfoSphere Data Explorer, it used to be called Vivissimo Velocity. And the core capability really is the ability to connect lots of different data together without moving it. So connecting both structured and unstructured data, and then being able to run analytics on it. And I think the reason that IBM was so interested in our technology is as Hadoop was growing and gaining popularity, and they were able to go ahead and run some analytics on top of Hadoop, customers kept coming and saying, oh, okay, this is great, this is really interesting. We've got a data store here, which is a lot cheaper than what we're used to using, but guess what? We just have another silo now. We have one more silo of information. And the true value is when you can connect the information that's in Hadoop and run analytics there with all other data, structured and unstructured. So that's why we fit into this overall big data platform. So we offer the ability to go through and navigate and kind of explore through all data, structured, unstructured, and then present it in a way without necessarily moving it so that it's ripe for analytics.
Fantastic, thank you very much.
So can I ask a question too, because I'm curious about this.
Give her a coin.
Historically, our business has always been around structured data, and so Vivissimo enables unstructured data, which is 80% of all data, so it's a lot more than structured data.
Yes.
So when IBM did the acquisition, was it, I guess this is my, because IBM tends to do this, so IBM has a product, has a solution that does a piece of the picture, but now with Vivissimo they can do both. This is probably unfair to ask either of you, because you know Federation and you know Vivissimo.
But don't let that stop you.
I know, really. So do the two work, can the two work together, or is Vivissimo, because of the way it does both, is it simpler to implement than doing Federation and then Vivissimo? Would you do both together, or would that be stupid?
We have lots of customers that do both together, and a lot of it comes down to what they've been using previously. We very rarely go into a brand new greenfield environment.
Okay.
We are often going into situations where lots of other products have been working well for their purpose and are in place. And so we have this capability within Vivissimo to go ahead and take advantage of whatever's in the environment. So if you're using Federation Server and it's already providing a lot of detail, good combination of that structured data for you,
Yeah.
you can just index that. You can just access the results of that and then tie it with the unstructured. So the idea is not a rip and replace, it's to take advantage of whatever you already have in your environment.
So
Right.
so the other question for you, just in terms of, because we're, this is stuff we love, and I apologize if I'm going
This is
on
fine,
with this,
yeah.
but one question is, who do you think your biggest competitor is right now? Do you like play well with Informatica, or would you rather be there instead of Informatica?
Well, if this were on YouTube, I might answer it differently. But since I'm very cognizant of the fact that this might go other places, I mean, we're very open. The idea of the IBM platform is not to be just Big Blue. I mean, of course, that would be great for us revenue-wise,
Right.
but that's not the reality of any customer situation. So we will work with
Whatever's
Cool.
with whatever's there.
Thank you.
Informatica is simply another data source.
You got it.
And we're drawing upon it using, the Data Explorer. Data Explorer now is a kernel within Optum for retirement. Okay.
I didn't
So
know
to
that.
answer your
That's very
question,
cool.
That makes sense.
So that takes, does that remove Attunity? Because Attunity used to do that job, right?
I'm not familiar.
Okay, I don't want to get too far down in the weeds.
and yes.
It is?
Yes,
Okay.
okay. And then secondarily, when I asked a question about supporting Hadoop
Mhm.
before, this is being recorded.
Yeah. So,
Wouldn't
You
it
may
be?
need to do
would-
some editing, I guess.
Wouldn't it be nice, for example, for the Optum retirement product to include a kernel of big insights?
sure. Yeah.
Okay,
Oh, yeah.
all right. Expect that in the theater near
Near
you
you.
soon.
Coming soon?
Okay.
Very cool.
All right.
So the net of the discussion, if the mic didn't pick it up, is that Vivissimo, now Infosphere Data Explorer, plays well with others, including IBM's existing Federation technology, its legacy Federation technology, and that Hadoop is going to play with the Optum tooling for the data archiving and the application retirement. Very good, thank you. Donna, next slide. So what I want to emphasize from this slide, and you're probably going to see this slide a lot from IBM in the coming weeks and months and years, the idea is that this is not rip and replace, that big data is not going to solve all of your information management or analytics challenges. You want to use the right tool for the business case, the old saying that if the only tool you have is a hammer, every problem looks like a nail. When I started in this business, somebody mentioned SAS earlier. Every shop I walked into was using SAS. It was a ubiquitous tool, and people were using SAS for things that SAS was never intended to do and didn't do them very well. So the idea is you want to pick the right tool, and IBM has the broadest portfolio of tooling to help you address the business case. So get together with your IBM rep or your business partner, especially your business partner, and speak. We play well with others too. So the idea is we want to get together with you and help you decide which tool is going to meet the requirements for your business case. Donna, go ahead. Okay, so a couple of slides on our mainframe strategy. My good friend in the back, Rich Gast, manages the Z technical professionals for the East in the U.S. So this was in here even before I knew you were coming.
Thanks, Frank. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Donna, go ahead.
I'm going to do it quick.
Yeah. So the idea is that the IBM mainframe is here to stay. We are absolutely we the Fillmore Group. I grew up on the IBM MVS, then OS 390, then ZOS, and I heard a story again from Dan Boardman, who runs the IBM Silicon Valley lab, who said that there was a new CIO had come into a large Fortune 500 company, and he found out that they were running mainframes, and he said, "Why are we still doing that mainframe stuff? Haven't we gotten off of that?" And somebody went and told him, they said, about 90% of our business runs on the IBM mainframe. You just don't know it because it just runs. It's not the stuff that gets your attention, but it is the backbone of financial services and banking and transportation and just all sorts of industries. So go ahead, Donna, please. So the DB2 Analytics Accelerator, I mentioned this earlier, the IDAA, actually combines two technologies together. It takes the traditional DB2 for ZOS mainframe and lashes to it a Netezza appliance, now the Pure Data System for analytics, so that the DB2 optimizer at runtime can make the decision that a query would run better against the Netezza processor. So rather than having to ETL your data, of extract it from the mainframe, put it on another platform, and go through all that process, or instead of having a bunch of indexes set up in your DB2 for ZOS to manage analytic queries, all that can be done using the IDAA. The idea is that the data is copied over to the IDAA, and so the data resides in both places. It can be maintained near real time in both data stores, so that a query can be routed either place based on what the optimizer's decision is the best place for it. So go ahead, give me the next slide. So you can see this is an eye chart, but you can see the dramatic increases in performance. The number of times faster, lower number is better here, but you can see a query that ran for over 2 hours using DB2 only ran in 5 seconds with IDA, and similar results like that. We helped implement at a large financial services institution their IDA. We worked with another customer with a native Netezza, and so there are just use cases where it just screams. And so being able to deploy this technology both for your transaction processing systems as well as your data warehouse is really important. Go ahead. One of the other things that I wanted to point out, and this is new in IDAA version 3 that came out in November, is heretofore the requirement was that the data needed to reside in both platforms, in DB2 as well as Netezza. So you were storing the data in 2 different places, as you do with data warehouses today. So for archival purposes, in version 3, IDAA restriction on the data being in both places was removed. So the idea that I could have older data, archived data, stored in the IDAA for analysis, but my active transactional data will remain in both places. So what this chart is saying is that I have moved multiple partitions from my primary data store in DB2 for ZOS and now exclusively resides in the IDAA. So I still issue a single query, but now I can either A, have the query go and get the data from both places if necessary, no change to my application. The optimizer will know, oh, by the way, some of the data now resides exclusively in the Netezza, so you're going to need to go get that data there and union it with the active data. Or I could set a special register and actually go out and query that data directly without having to go through the optimizer choice. So the idea is that now I can use this, and it's called the high performance storage saver. It's actually a lot cheaper to store terabytes of archival data here on the IDAA. Go ahead. Okay, and then finally our Oracle takeout strategy. Just a couple more slides to go. Go ahead, Tom. So DB2 is definitely focusing on Oracle as a competitor. Arvind Krishna referred to this as a knife fight. The idea is that they are definitely attacking Oracle. Oracle can be 3 times as expensive, and DB2 on Power runs 3 times faster. There's a lot of hardware and OS exploitation that IBM can do in the bundle together. So 98% of the Oracle PLSQL is compatible with the DB2, built into DB2 version 9.7. And we have ways to test this. We can run the query capture replay, for which the Fillmore group was one of the beta sites. Actually capture your Oracle workload in production and then run against the DB2 database and just see that level of compatibility.
Do you have any comparisons on compression?
Do not.
Okay.
I don't think I have it in here. I think I have it in other slides. And compression is one of the differentiators for storage saving.
Yeah.
The question was, do we have anything on compression?
But the new version and the 10.5 compression is so extraordinary. It's 10 times greater than the compression in version 10.1. So I don't think there are any statistics out right now comparing the two because I don't.
Yeah, maybe too new. Go ahead, Don.
Just say like a zillion times.
A zillion?
Yeah,
That's
that's
another
the legal term.
How do you get started? So what we, as a business partner, what your IBM rep can do for you is help you assess how much money you can save using the business value assessment tool. The idea is that we can calculate based on your Oracle licensing costs now, what it would cost to get equivalent software from DB2, and you can actually see the dollars and cents. And they said this is, a lot of the Oracle takeouts are a decision made in the CFO's office, not the CIO's office. A lot of customers are not happy with the level of support that they receive from Oracle, and the licensing charges are just astronomical. I talked to a student in a class who works for a federal government agency. He said Larry Ellison himself visited our agency and told us that the software prices were going to go up in the next couple of years pretty significantly. And they said our agency said we just can't afford it, so we are actively exploring this technology, and we plan within 2 years to be completely rid of Oracle, just because of that. They said we can't afford it. Larry's a billionaire already. He doesn't need any more money. So this is sort of an overview of the process. We can examine your Oracle ULAs, the contracting vehicles. We can perform an application migration test, pick something small and manageable, and see how that works. Running your existing applications against DB2. Attend DB2 training or an IBM POC, get some skills. Review the proposal, and then do the production conversion. This is the roadmap. So it's not, a lot of people might think this is pretty onerous, but we can make it happen. We have lots of customer references who've been very successful. One customer we worked with, a financial services institution, they went from a standing start, migrated their first Oracle database in production in 90 days. It was 3 or 4 folks from their staff and 2 from the Fillmore group. And that included high availability and backup and recovery and everything. It was pretty impressive. Go ahead. And I'm not going to go through this eye chart, just lots of facts about the IBM databases, the pervasiveness of DB2 technology throughout the world. IBM has more patents than Oracle and SQL Server combined. IBM invented the relational database. They know the technology. As you can see from the earlier slides, they're still setting the technology boundaries today. Go ahead, Don. Okay, so here is the summary. We're just a couple of slides from lunch. So what I'd like to do is any questions that anybody has. Anything that wasn't addressed, anything that we need to cover more? Okay.
Could you talk about SQL DS on VSE?
The question was about SQL DS on VSE, and the answer is, unfortunately, I can. I worked on that database. I started my career. Where did the audience go? That's right, they headed to the table for lunch. That's the problem with this recording, too. You're not going to be able to taste this food. Let me tell you, it's going to be really good. So go ahead and give me the next slide. So 2 more slides. One is our next event is an information management virtual users group. My colleague Kim May has started virtual users groups for DB2 Connect, for Q replication, for IBM replication technologies, for information management within the Mid-Atlantic region, which is where we're based, and the 4th one, there, I know that there are 4
it's
virtual
Q
users.
replication, Mid-Atlantic users, DB2 Connect, and it's DB2 Server for VSE and VM.
Get out of town, you're right, thank you very much.
They still exist.
No, they still exist.
Yeah.
That is the 4th virtual users group. So that was a nice segue.
And actually, I didn't start them. Blair started them before she became a professional. So, yeah.
So our next event is a virtual users group. Kim just had an IM virtual users group with IBM colleague Bill Kincaid. The next one is going to be with IBM colleague Warren Heising. It's entitled IBM Data Management, What You Should Know. So this is going to do a much deeper dive on the April 3rd announcements that I covered in just a couple of slides. So a lot more about Blue and compression and acceleration, etc. And so it's May 7th. 2013, it's going to be available from 11 to 12, and it also will be recorded and up on the web as well. So go ahead, one more. And finally, some resources if you need to follow up on any of these topics. Kim and I are both fairly frequent bloggers, not as frequently as I think I need to be, but we try to, the couple of topics that I mentioned here today, one example was the high performance storage saver blog entry on that. So go to the Fillmore Group's blog and search. We have a lot of good technical content available. This presentation will be up there as well. Contact information for Kim, email and Twitter. For me, our channel DB2 location if you want to go out and see this, or our other recorded webcasts. And if you do Flipboard on iPad, iPhone, or Android, I have a big data magazine, so please become a reader. With that, any more questions? Thank you very much. Let's eat.